Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle to triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. Let's jump right in. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for this episode of Her Version. The Her Version platform is built on storytelling and the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from listening to other people's stories. Today, I am speaking with an amazing woman named Hilary. Hilary is here to talk about her journey through years of toxic work environments, how she began to strategize for her future, and the fear and power that came with breaking free from her 9-to-5. She will be talking openly about the ups and downs she endured during this time and the victories she has had in building her own empire over the past 7 years. Welcome, Hilary.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yes.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to hang out with us and share your journey. I'm so excited to dive in. I know the first time we talked, it was a fairly short conversation. So I'm really excited to kind of get to know you a little bit more and hear about what you've been through. How are you? How's your week been?
I'm good. Week has been good, hectic, stressful, wonderful. I don't know, all of the things.
Yes.
All of the things.
You're north, right?
I am. I'm in Philly. Yeah. So it is actually, I think it's like hitting 50. It's going to be in the 50s the next few days. So this is like a real break from, it's been very cold up here. So I'll take it.
Yeah, no, totally. I remember those days being in Chicago. 50 was like shorts and a t-shirt almost.
Yeah. It
now,
feels like summer.
Now here in Florida, 50, we're like free. We don't go outside.
I know, your winter coats.
We're like inappropriate to be going outside at 50. It's too cold.
That's so funny.
Yeah, it is funny. Well, listen, I want to jump in. I want to kind of hand the floor over to you and give you the opportunity to kind of go through, your journey and your story that you're wanting to open up and share with us, and then kind of break it down and figure out how you did it all. Is that cool?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. There you go.
So, I guess I should start just by saying it, and this is something you and I had spoken about too. Like, I always felt like I was destined for greatness. I know that saying that makes me sound like I'm crazy, but I always had high hopes for myself. I always felt like I could do it. I always thought I was going to do great things, and I always worked really hard to get there. And I wanted to work in television. I interned all through college to get to TV by the time I was done with school. And I was hired. I had a series of wonderful internships, and I was hired by the Colbert Report, which at the time was like starting fresh, like a spinoff from The Daily Show, to be Stephen Colbert's assistant right out of college. And I loved it. I loved the experience. It was wonderful. But after a little over 2 years there, I felt very stifled. Like I didn't want to be a lifelong assistant, which I think they knew. And it's funny, I've never had a mentor in a office environment. Like it's always been a real like dog eat dog kind of vibe everywhere I've been. And there was one female producer who was like in charge of a lot. She was older, and she was in charge of basically deciding who got promoted and who didn't. And I applied for a promotion, and I knew she didn't really like me. And she did not put me in for the promotion. And Yeah, and I ended up leaving because I just wasn't willing to stay, and, I've been working. I was started in TV, I ended up in marketing. It's all very ego-driven environments, so
Mhm.
when you're working with people who it's all about the ego for them, it's not really a meritocracy. It's really just about, like, who they like or who they don't like, or who makes them feel good or who doesn't make them feel good, or who doesn't challenge them and who does challenge them. But I left, I went on to do other great things. I freelanced, I worked on a lot of, little projects. I got to work on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductions. I met Lady Gaga before she was like famous. She just had a MySpace page at the time, which is really
Oh,
aging me.
wow.
Um, yeah, and it was really fun. And I ended up landing another full time job at College Humor, which was really on the rise at the time, and no one else was doing what they were
Yes.
doing. Like, this is when web-based content was like a novelty of a concept. And they hired me to produce a series, and then like a limited series for them, and then kept me on to produce an MTV show for them. And the showrunner that they brought in to run that show also just didn't like me. I mean, the thing that I realized is, if I were a man, I would have gotten promoted in all of these situations, but I'm a small, petite girl, and I think people have preconceived notions of what I should behave like, or, just be a fly on the wall and be lucky that I have my job. And that was never how I felt like my contributions should be, you know, integrated into the workplace.
Yeah.
So I had I, the other team, I worked with all men. I was the only woman on the staff. I'd been working really hard, and the other producers said that they wanted to promote me, like they wanted to give me a title bump before the show went to air. But that the executive producer who I clashed with was the one who was going to decide like what that title would be. And he calls me into his office, and I sit in his office, and he tells me that he's going to give me the lowest possible promotion that he can,
Wow.
because I think his exact words were, if we were in LA, you would know that you should be seen and not heard. You would know your place. And
Wow.
yep, and he said this to me, and I sat there and I said thank you, and he said anything else, and I said nope, and I left his office and I went right to the bathroom and started crying. Um,
Yes.
but it was really important to me for them not ever to see me cry. I did a lot of bathroom crying in
Yeah,
all of these roles.
I get that.
And then I left College Humor after a few years and went to, I produced another show for Plum TV, which I think eventually was acquired by NBC. And it was great, but I was just feeling very burnt out with TV. It was just very hard emotionally to keep slogging along, trying to fight for what I knew I was good at and what I was doing. And at that time, my now husband, came back into my life. We'd actually met in college, but didn't start dating until our late 20s. And he was based in Philly, and I ended up moving down to Philly with him and being like, you know what, I'll figure out the work stuff. I'll figure it out. I ended up working in marketing for nonprofits, because that was really like the only place that would hire me. Um, and even at nonprofits, like my boss at the nonprofit, like I remember she'd constantly say to me, like, "You're like a younger, prettier version of me." And I'm like, "What am I supposed to say? Like, who says that? What kind of response are you trying to get out of me?" Like, it was just a very weird. I've never had a good boss. I mean, that's really it. I've never had a good boss. I've never had a mentor. I've never had someone who was willing to like take me under their wing and help lift me up.
Mhm.
Um, so I
Do you
left.
think do you think a lot of that is because of the ego-driven, so they kinda have to keep you down so that they're not, do you
I
think?
do, because I think I'm ambitious, and I'm not, I think for women that's a dirty word. And
Yeah.
that's something I really struggled with for many years because I felt guilt about being ambitious.
Mhm.
And now, I mean, now I run my own business. I joke that I'm like the best boss I've ever had. Um,
Yes.
yeah, and like there's no shame in the ambition game, like I love it. If I wasn't ambitious, I wouldn't be here doing what I'm doing now, and I wouldn't be as successful as I am.
Yeah.
And I think there's a real um deficit of understanding in the corporate workspace of like ambitious, like people just are uncomfortable with ambitious women. They
Yeah.
just don't like that. They want them to just, be fine being where they are and let the men do the work. And that was never, ever okay with me. I was never okay with that. And it's funny because then eventually I went on to my last corporate job was as communications manager for a big medical device company here in Philadelphia. And um, I started off as like a superstar there. Like they loved me. I had so much responsibility. I loved my boss. We got along really well. And then he started dating this woman in the office who hated me. I mean, for no reason, she hated me. And I knew that she hated me because the two of them would go out for like happy hours with other coworkers and get drunk. And she would tell anyone that would listen how she hated me. She thought I was in love with her boyfriend, who was my boss. I was like newly married at the time. Like the whole thing was just crazy.
Mhm.
But increasingly, as their relationship went on, like I was getting mercilessly harassed by the two of them.
Wow.
And it was so intense. I developed stomach problems. I was anxious about going to work. I didn't know if it would be a good day or a bad day to show up at work. And all I wanted to do was do my work and keep my head down. You know, and it's also not the first time I'd been in that situation. Like back at College Humor, I was in that situation. Like there was always someone that was just not, I don't know. I just wanted to do the work and that's it.
Yeah.
And then it's easy to internalize like, have I brought all of these situations on myself? Like, is this me? Is there something wrong with me? What is happening? And the biggest thing that I think the biggest takeaway from that experience, and honestly looking back on it from all of those experiences, I never let them get me down or control my narrative. I was like, I'm not letting them push me out because everyone was like, why don't you just quit? And I'm like, I'm not going to quit until I want to quit. I'm not going to
Yeah.
let them push me out. Like, I'm not going to let, okay, he doesn't want to give me that promotion with the title I deserve. That's fine. I'm still going to show up every day and smile and do my job and go cry in the bathroom.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
I just never wanted anyone to feel the satisfaction of hurting me because I really felt like that's what they were aiming for. And yeah, I mean, it was a horrible experience. I collected 22 pages of documents that I brought to HR to like detail the harassment that I had been facing, and HR did nothing.
Wow.
Um, and it's interesting because I ended up leaving, like after I left, like a few years after I left, the Me Too movement was popular, and the HR director ended up reaching out to me like during the when the movement was first happening, saying, all of this stuff has been making me think of you and it wasn't handled properly and I'm really sorry.
Wow. That must have felt so good.
It
Yes
was
and no?
it was the validation that I needed, but it was also like too little, too late. Like,
Yeah.
where were you when I needed you the most? Like,
Yeah.
why could you not recognize that I needed help and you were in the position to help me and you chose not to? Like, that was a conscious decision that was
Yeah.
made to not help me and not support me.
Is that a male
Um,
or female, that person?
a female.
Wow. No shit.
Mhm.
Crazy.
Yeah, I mean, and really ultimately the final straw, I got pregnant. Like, so I that boss ended up getting fired,
Mhm.
not having to do with me. Like, I mean, they realized he was just like a terrible person. He ended up getting fired. Um, and I stayed and I got pregnant. This was probably like 6 months after he had left. I was pregnant with my first child. And I when I told my company that I was pregnant, um, I started to see a shift in how they were treating me. Like, I really didn't feel like they were wanting me to come back from my maternity. I felt like I was getting pushed out. And the final straw happened when I was 7 months pregnant. There was an ice storm here. It was January 2015. So this was about 7 years ago. There was an ice storm here, and I requested to work from home because the conditions were so dangerous that I didn't think it was safe for me to come into I mean, sheets of ice covering the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And they denied my request to work from home. The same HR director, the woman, denied my
Really?
request to work from home, forced me to use paid time off. Um, and I honestly was just so at my wit's end that day that's the day that I decided to build my business, because I was just like, I can't depend on working for other people and also be a mom. Like, if this is how it is just when I'm pregnant and like need a little extra help, it's not going to be better when the baby comes and like she's sick, or I have to take her to the doctor, or something happens, whatever, like childcare falls through. Like, they're not going to be kind or flexible with me. And I was at my wit's end. Like, I just felt like for years I hadn't been treated like a human, and I was done. I was just done.
Yeah. No, I totally understand that. You kind of talking about this reminded me of I listened to Dr. Phil live and his podcast. He has a podcast, and on his podcast, he was talking about how the topic was narcissism. And he's
Uh-huh.
like, on average, like population worldwide as a whole, I don't know what the numbers is, like, this is a lie, but like 15% of the people are maybe lower, maybe
Narcissist?
higher, I don't know, are narcissists. Yeah, like
Wow,
real
it's high.
narcissists. Yeah, it might be
Yeah,
high. That might be a total lie.
yeah.
It might be 7. I don't know. But what
Okay.
was so funny, the point is, he was talking about corporate jobs, people in management, Hollywood,
Yeah,
and big cities. The narcissism is higher. He's like, for instance, Hollywood, it's probably more like 50%
right. Yeah.
is narcissistic, and and higher up in corporates, because he's like, these people like to have control. They like to like be in control of people. They like to have
Power.
money with power.
Yeah.
Exactly. So then he kind of made a joke because he's in Hollywood. So he's like, he goes, yeah, so people who are on shows, people who have their own shows. And then he kind of made a joke. He's like, I know what you're thinking, but no. um, but yeah, people in power tend to sometimes abuse, that power. And unfortunately for you and your story, you were kind of the wrath that you had to go through a lot of that and endure a lot of that. I'm sorry, that's not fun.
It's not fun, but it's funny. I wrote a blog post years ago. I actually think it's still on my LinkedIn page, but the premise was how much I learned from my horrible bosses, like how much I learned not to act and do and be like them based on the crazy, horrible experiences I had with
Yeah.
each of them.
Yeah.
And I listed out like 5 different horrible bosses and the lesson I learned along
Yes.
the way. And, I think, my field too, like what I do is so empathy driven that I don't I don't hold on to it, like, I don't blame them, and again, I think I learned like, I found a way to make each harrowing experience a positive for me, and, I've gotten feedback over the past few years from people I have managed and worked with, and especially, like, younger people. I've taken a lot of them under my wing, especially young women, and the the things that they have said to me about, like, how I've been like the best boss they've ever had, and I helped them so much, and I credit that completely to all of the horrible experience, like learning what not to do and how not to act is sometimes just as valuable as learning, like only having good experiences and seeing what is great and works. Cause like maybe you take it for granted more when you're just in, like if it's sunny all the time, how do you appreciate the sun? Like it needs to rain every now and then so you can appreciate
Yeah.
how wonderful a sunny day is. So,
Yes.
yeah, so I guess it's also a mindset thing. Like I found a way to make it all work for me
Yeah. And
in
I
the
think a lot of
moment.
people need to hear that. I think that there's a lot of people that stay in their problem, they stay in their darkness, which is fine. It's okay to be sad, it's okay to be mad. But there comes a time, like you said, where you need to sit back and write out the lessons that you've learned from all of the stuff that you've been through. I want to ask, speaking of the past, the things you've been through, obviously your the lifespan of which you've gone through all of this stuff is vast. What would you consider
20
to
years.
be yeah,
Uh,
what would you consider to be your biggest failure during all of this, and how did you deal with it?
so that's a really good question. That's a really good question. And I think part of part of my answer about like how I've been able to use every failure to become a stepping stone to get to the next level, that like I can't actually pinpoint a failure or say like I would do something differently, because it all led to me being here, right? Like it's funny, like a friend of mine years ago, you know, the nature of what okay, I'm backtracking now, but the nature of what I love doing is I love controlling and like harnessing chaos. It's why, I mean, it has a lot to do with how I grew up. But there's a lot of chaos in my house. And so I'm good at it. I'm good at remaining very calm in the middle of chaos. And that's what made me really good at working in TV. I worked on like a lot of live TV where like you just always have to be 3 steps ahead and like have a plan B, a plan C, a plan D. Like you just need to know that you can kind of control the outcome of the uncontrollable. And I thought that was a formula for success for so long, of like, okay, if I just like have these plans and have a plan B and I can control this, then like I'll be good. And in my early 20s, I broke up with a boyfriend, and like the job was kind of falling apart, and like there was all this stuff that I couldn't control. And a friend of mine who is just like a wonderful person, she gave me this mantra which has stayed with me for these last 15 years. um I let go easily, trusting that nothing good ever leaves my life unless something better is coming. And it's that.
Wait, say that again. You trust
Okay,
that what?
I let go easily, trusting that nothing good ever leaves my life unless something better is coming.
Yes. Oh, I love that.
And really internalizing that message has helped me never dwell on failure. I don't think of failure as failure. I think of like, I'm letting go of I can't control this outcome. Maybe this is not what I wanted, but I have to trust, because the past has shown me that this is a bad boyfriend leaves your life, it's to make room for the husband that's coming your way. Like a bad job, you get laid off from a job that you thought was great, it's only to make room for a better thing that you didn't even know was possible. And I've really internalized that and embodied that mindset for the last 15 years, and it's been transformative to really go through life trusting in that, and trusting in myself, and trusting that I'll always land on my feet, and trusting that like even if I can't see it at the time, if something is leaving my life, it's because there needs to be room for something better to enter. And
Absolutely.
it's really, yeah, it makes me not I don't think about failure. I just think of like, okay, pivot. What's next? Like, how can I use this to my advantage to move on to what's next?
Yeah. I want to dive into this a little bit because this is honestly triggering me a little. And I think that this will be beneficial. So one of the issues that I have dealt with that I am conquering is, to me, not projecting this on anybody else, to me, it's difficult to say that I haven't had issues or challenges or failures. Now, I believe the same thing you believe. You know, all of it has taught me something. I have a hard time completely like disengaging from saying I haven't had any failures or regrets or however you want to put that, because to me it feels like it's negating what happened. Like
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't that big of a deal, but it was a big deal. And I don't know if you have anything to add to that or you have any personal feelings on that, but I kind of want to touch on that if you have anything to add to that, because I think that that's why sometimes people hold on to, look at this failure, look at this, look at this, look at this, because they feel like if they turn those bad things into a learning experience, into something good, then it takes away from all of the hurt that happened to them.
I understand that. And I would never, ever encourage anyone to like diminish a fail, like feel like they have to gloss over it to not feel a failure. I think for me, and again, I mean, I mentioned my childhood. So my dad's an alcoholic, and my childhood was stressful. Let's just say that my childhood was stressful, and there was a lot of pressure to keep like the secret, like a family secret.
Got
And
it.
for me, that was really hard to stomach because the way to deal with things is not to not acknowledge them. And I think part of why I am so drawn to storytelling is because the more you tell your story, the less it owns you and the more you own it. And I think I learned really early on I was always a writer. I loved writing. And I think I learned really early on to like get it all out and talk to people. I mean, I'm honest, I'm open. I don't, anyone who knows me personally, even professionally, like I'm an open book. And I think that is important because I think the more you talk about it and the more you don't hold on to it and be ashamed of it, the more you can let it go. The
Yeah.
more it's out in the world, the less it belongs to you and the more it becomes part of your myth, your past, your legend, like I I mean, I've experienced a lot of hardship. I've experienced a lot of personal and professional hardship, a lot of emotional stuff. I mean, I've joked to friends like my life is always a circus and or like a soap opera. It's like as soon as you think you know what the storyline is, something crazy is happening and it's like, oh God, there's more. And it's constant.
Yeah.
But the more I talk about it with people, the less I feel like it's owning me. I don't know, the less I feel controlled by it and the more I feel like, okay, I can move forward. And I think that's, like I was saying, especially after my final bad boss experience, I really internalized like what is wrong with me? Like what am I doing wrong that I keep attracting these situations and these people into my life? Like, and it's just jobs. And most of the jobs would start off amazing and I loved it and I loved the people and then it goes downhill from there and I'm just like, I don't understand. Like, and instead of holding on to that and making it about me, I wrote that article about what I have learned from all of my bad bosses and the experience and the act of writing it, and so for other people it's journaling. I happen to not be a big journaler, but I am writing constantly, so it's kind of similar.
Mhm.
But the act of writing it down and changing the narrative a little and getting out of my own head and then sharing it with people and having people relate to it and start a conversation about it. I mean, that really helps me. I mean, so I guess that's the way to answer the biggest failure question. It's not
Yeah,
that I don't acknowledge them, it's that I try to not let them own me in a way that like I'm just constantly in my head about what's going on. I try to get it out um, and process it
absolutely.
pretty
And I
immediately.
think that that's a great compromise to individuals who are kind of stuck in that feeling of that it's being minimized, you know? Yeah, learned something from it, but still hurts. And you're saying, yes, yes, 100%. However, we have a choice to either stay in the hurt or learn from it. And it's not taking away, you're not taking away the fact that this stuff happened to you. You're just choosing to view it differently and you're choosing to speak about it and teach other people from your experiences. And I think that that's the key. Go ahead.
Yeah, and every now and then, I mean, even talking about it now, like I feel, like I have like feelings about what it was like to be in my body at the time that those things were happening to me. And it was it didn't feel good. It didn't feel, and it stays with you a little bit. But again, like I can talk about it with you openly in front of an audience of strangers and I'm not crying and I'm here and I'm strong. And I'm not ashamed of it. And I'm amazed that I made it through it. And, I mean, you and I were talking privately a little before this just about the fact that I have two girls. I have two daughters. And a big part of my wish for them is that they can graduate college and start a job and not ever experience what I experienced. I mean, I don't know. I'm hopeful that the world is moving in a different direction, especially after Me Too and, all of this, which kind of happened after I left the corporate world. But
Mhm.
I'm really hoping that the world that they enter as adult women will be very different than what I experienced.
It's a good hope.
It is a good hope. I mean,
And we're
I'm
moving in that
skeptical, but
direction.
I'm
Yeah.
hopeful.
We are moving in that direction. I
Yeah,
agree.
down with the
Um,
patriarchy.
yeah. For the individuals that are watching live, I want to say thank you so much for supporting us and hanging out with us.